What's up, guys? So I had intended for this to go up last week, but last week got pretty hectic. I had assignments and stuff that I was handing in. I wasn't here Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. I was down in Sydney with some friends, doing sort of some personal stuff, and applying for jobs and basically just adulting, and didn't really get around to filming this. So I'm filming it now, putting it up today, in place of what was going to be today, which will just get moved to later this week. And so the current plan is to have a video every day this week, to make up for not having the Wednesday and the Friday video last week. So this video is going to be, it's going to be called a deep dive, but it's really going to be more speculative than anything else, because as far as we know, the only thing that's been confirmed for this particular title is that it's happening, and that is the Fantastic Four in the MCU. So I'm going to go into who I think the cast should be, who my fan cast would be, as well as why I disagree with some of the popular choices that I've seen out there, and I'm going to talk about potential villains we could have, which could set up potential storylines in the MCU further on, and yeah. So let's get straight into this, because we've got a lot to cover. Alright, so I'm going to be fan casting the Fantastic Four themselves, as well as Doctor Doom, but I will talk more about him when I get to him, because I have reasons for not wanting him to appear sort of straight away, in a sense. And then at the end I'll talk pretty quickly about some of the major villains they could have, and yeah, what storylines that could take them into. So I'm going to start with the actors that I don't think should be, and then I'll obviously end with my pick. So for Mr. Fantastic, I've read a whole heap of different people's fan castings, watched videos, looked at images on the internet, all sorts of stuff to try and find out who are the popular ones. Only one of my castings hasn't been brought up before, as far as I'm aware, but I'll get to that in due course. So for Mr. Fantastic, Patrick Wilson has been mentioned a couple of times on different lists. I don't see him getting it, purely because he is Ocean Master in the DCEU. He didn't die at the end of Aquaman, which means that his character has the potential to come back. So not knowing what the contract's like for him over at DC, I don't see that happening. Also, being that he's the DC actor, I don't think Marvel's going to be jumping at him. It kind of seems a little unfair when you look at it at the surface, but Marvel doesn't like their actors being in DC movies. But then when you consider that that's in the spirit of fairness, to allow other people the opportunity to be in a superhero film, they're kind of sharing the love a little bit, while also being like, no, this is our actor, and we're not sharing our toys. So it's got good and bad parts about it, but I don't see Patrick Wilson getting Mr. Fantastic, even if he would make a great Mr. Fantastic. Oscar Isaac has been on a couple of people's lists. I don't see this personally. Obviously, I have only seen him in X-Men Apocalypse and the Star Wars movies that he's in as Poe Dameron, where he really doesn't have anything to do. So I'm probably missing out on some really great acting by him, but I don't see it. You can scream at me in the comments if you wish, but I don't see it. Matt Smith was on a couple of people's lists. I kind of think that he's, I mean, if they're going for a younger Mr. Fantastic and like a younger Fantastic Four, yeah, sure. But considering that in like the very first Fantastic Four, he's already been a scientist for a number of years, then he gets his powers. I don't see them going for a younger one. Plus, we saw what a younger Reed Richards looked like in Fantastic, and we know how famously that failed. It's really funny when I watch videos where it's like, yeah, that film didn't do too well, blah blah blah, and then people say that other films are the worst Marvel films, when critically, Fantastic is the worst film. So yeah, I don't think they're going to go with the younger Fantastic Four for this, so I don't think Matt Smith's going to qualify for that. He might be able to turn up as a villain. That'd be really cool. I'm pretty sure I've seen him pull off some pretty sinister villains before. Off the top of my head, cannot remember what, but I do recall seeing him at least once as a pretty sinister villain. I think that'd be a more appropriate place for him if he was going to join the MCU. And so my pick for Mr. Fantastic is the ever-popular choice of John Krasinski. Not only because of all of the reasons that everyone ever has put out there, but also because he was in the running to be Captain America. So Marvel's already looked at him before to play a role. He can do comedy, action, and horror, allowing him to go into the lighter parts of the character, the darker parts of the character, as well as still being sort of this centered team leader that he needs to be. And this little spot of trivia that I read on IMDb, I'm pretty sure, that said that Phase 4 is going to have a film directed by one of its main cast members, and John Krasinski acted in and directed A Quiet Place, as well as, I'm pretty sure, some of the episodes of the later seasons of The Office. So he's got it within his ability to do that as well, if the Fantastic Four is that film. So yeah, hands down John Krasinski. So Invisible Woman, I've seen actors rather, like Natalie Dormer, again, if they're going for a younger one, because she is quite baby-faced. Natalie Dormer would be brilliant. But again, I don't see them doing a younger version, so that unfortunately takes Natalie Dormer off my list. Rosamund Pike and Charlize Theron would both be great picks. And I saw Blake Lively on a couple of people's lists as well. I honestly think she'd do better as like Copycat in whatever they're doing with Deadpool, considering that throughout the comics, Copycat has always been sort of the recurring love interest, and Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds are married, and so for that exact same reason, Emily Blunt for Invisible Woman, as well as the fact that she was considered to play Black Widow, back in Iron Man 2, as well as her like serious acting chops as well. in addition to her real life marriage to John Krasinski. Obviously, they are the two most wanted for those two characters, and then the other two characters in the team are very, very open to debate. And so I'm going to put my 2 cents forward here for those two as well. For Human Torch, there's been Dacre Montgomery. Don't have enough information to completely rule him out. So I'd still go see the film if he was in the role. I don't think there's any actors that I'd just not go see. I'd more be going to watch the story. But as far as acting goes, and still wanting the experience to be enjoyable, because I want there to be a good Fantastic Four film. Love the Fantastic Four. I don't have enough to say that he'd do a bad job, but by the same token, I don't have enough to say that he'd be my pinnacle of who the Human Torch should be. Sam Claflin's been put in. I don't think so, for the same reasons as I don't think they're going to do a younger Fantastic Four. Johnny Storm's the younger brother of Sue Storm, so I don't see them casting an older Johnny Storm, because if you look back at all of their Fantastic Four movies, no matter how bad they've been, Johnny Storm's characters always had that youthfulness and sort of rebellious side to him, and you really need sort of a younger actor, not a young actor, but a younger actor to pull that off. So I don't see Sam Claflin getting it. Liam Hemsworth, I've already put my 2 cents in about. I think he should be in the Guardians films, playing a role there, whether that's as Adam Warlock or whatever. I think that'd be really cool to see. So I don't think he should be Human Torch. And Andrew Garfield has been on people's lists for Human Torch as well. But I kind of think that, considering that he was the Spider-Man of the time when the Sony deal went through, I don't think they're going to be sort of looking at him, at least for a little while. He may end up being an X-Man or something. I can see him as like a one and done sort of X-Man in one of the X-Men movies. But yeah, I don't think he would be considered for Human Torch, considering that that's the higher priority of the Fox titles. And so I'm going with Zac Efron. It actually took me a little bit of convincing, but once I sort of sat down, looked at it, sort of reread the character bio, and sort of got the ideologies and mannerisms, behaviour and all that of Human Torch fully in mind, that it became quite clear that Zac Efron would be great. He's already got his working relationship with Disney, who owns Marvel, working in his favour. He's done some serious stuff since doing that as well. Wow. Where's my throat's just suddenly gone really dry. That's better. Yeah, so he's already got his working relationship with Disney in his favour. He's done some serious stuff since doing his Disney films. Like he was in, I think it was Ted Bundy tapes. He's done Baywatch. He's done a bunch of other stuff and sort of developed himself as an actor outside of being the teen heartthrob. But then again, he does still have that going for him as well. Like, he's still young enough to be the teen heartthrob sort of thing. As well as a point that I'm going to bring up because it relates to who I have in mind for The Thing. So I'm going to move on to that so I can explain that to you guys as well. So the ones that I've seen on the list for The Thing have been David Harbour, who is Red Guardian, therefore already exists in the MCU, counting him out pretty much straight out of the gate. Ron Perlman, I was one of the guys that was really wanting Ron Perlman as Cable in Deadpool 2. Now that Cable needs to be recast, Ron Perlman. John Cena and Terry Crews. I mean, both of these actors would be great in the role. However, both of these actors are more comfortable in comedy films and being funny characters. The Thing's quite serious. He'll have a sarcastic retort to being sort of mercilessly picked on by Johnny in like a lighthearted way. But other than that, he's usually all business. He's the no-nonsense voice of reason for the team, trying to sort of keep them centered on doing the job because the job needs doing sort of thing, as well as his own character identity crisis of trying to regain his normality and get rid of the stony exterior, only to then realize that the powers that granted him were more useful than he could have ever imagined, and then wanting to get them back, which is not just from the movies, it's in the comic books as well, and I think that a comedy actor probably wouldn't be able to hit those notes properly. And so for that reason, I don't think that either of John Cena or Terry Crews should play the role. Who should play the role, for a variety of different reasons, mainly for that one though, is Dwayne Johnson. So he's been in Fast and Furious, playing Hobbs, so he's already been the no-nonsense voice of reason, like voice of the law sort of character. He's used to franchise work, having done that franchise for a couple of movies and then getting his own spin-off. So he's used to signing a multi-deal contract and that. He's already got a working relationship with Disney, having been the voice of Moana, voice of Maui in Moana, rather, as well as he was in Baywatch with Zac Efron, and they already have their comedic back and forth sort of relationship established. So mixing they in with superpowers, letting Dwayne Johnson pull on his experience from Fast and Furious, could really sort of help round this cast out, and I really like the idea of having the married couple be a married couple, and the two sort of like the younger brother really sort of acting like a younger brother, and then having this like no-nonsense voice of reason still being able to work really well with everybody. And I mean, aside from that, Dwayne Johnson's stage name is The Rock. He's going to be playing the Thing in this Dreamcast. Like, the puns and the memes make themselves there. Now on to villains and therefore storylines that we could use. For Doctor Doom, I've seen a couple of different ones. I'm leaning more towards one in particular, but there is another that is like 1% less. So I'm very on the fence about who I want. But I'll go with the ones that I don't want. So Bryan Cranston's been brought up, and I'm not ruling him out straight out the gate because he's not a good actor. He's a phenomenal actor. But I have seen the fan-made posters for him as Stanley in a biopic, which I really think Marvel and Disney should make, and that they should cast Bryan Cranston as Stan Lee in that. And if Marvel Studios is going to do that sort of in memoriam of their famed creator of all the most of their characters. Like, I really think Marvel Studios should be involved in that, and so therefore Bryan Cranston would be in that Marvel Studios film. It wouldn't be part of the MCU necessarily, but yeah, I still think that it should be a Marvel Studios film. So that's why I'm crossing him out. Michael Fassbender and Liev Schreiber, I don't see getting the role of Doctor Doom. We've already seen what Michael Fassbender can do with a Marvel villain, and they're not keeping him on as Magneto, so I don't see them giving him a different villain's role when most people would be like, oh, why is Magneto Doctor Doom all of a sudden? Particularly when they're both the Fox properties. Like, I don't see them just going, oh, well, we'll take these Fox actors, put them in the other Fox property, and package it with our name on it. Like, that's... yeah. Again, I think they're going to try and find some fresh takes. And Liev Schreiber, I think, should get his role as Sabretooth back. It's very unfortunate that we only got him as Sabretooth in one film, which was Wolverine Origins. He was one of the redeeming qualities of that film, being such a good Sabretooth, and I really think that he should get that back, considering that for most fans, we'd rather not remember that film. Was definitely a low point in the X continuity. And so that brings me to the two that I'm on the fence about. We've got Jeffrey Dean Morgan, who, despite my earlier thing about not wanting to recycle DCEU actors, I think it'd be really cool as a villain for the MCU. Doctor Doom, maybe. He is on people's lists, and can lay a beat down. Would he probably be better as a more physical attacker rather than the I guess special attacker with his because the character of Doctor Doom is a master of science and sorcery and being able to mix the two. So that doesn't really seem like something that you would cast Jeffrey Dean Morgan in, when most of his other stuff, particularly like Walking Dead, has been like physical beatdowns. I see him more as, what have we got here? Yeah, they don't really have a lot of physical beatdown main villains. I mean, I could see him doing a really good job as an X-Men villain. Maybe not Magneto, maybe someone more physical. But yeah, I still think that he'd make a really good villain. And if that ends up being Doctor Doom, I'd love to see what they do with him. And the other one being Nikolai Coster-Waldau, being the one that I'm leaning more towards as far as the actors that have been brought up before. Especially since Doctor Doom is a much darker character than Jaime Lannister, it'd give us all a chance to see him outside of a fantasy world in a more trying to be grounded reality, playing a very sinister, very dark character, as opposed to being on the wrong side of the war, still trying to do what's right, sort of thing. So I think it'd be very interesting. Can't remember if he was also one of my picks for Adam Warlock. He could have been, but yeah, I think he'd still do really well as Doctor Doom. Other villains that they could go with, if Marvel plans on revamping the Inhumans, getting a completely new cast and just doing what they did with the Netflix series and ignoring that the Inhumans season, the only season ever existed, then Maelstrom could be a really cool character. His father was on the Council of Genetics in Atalan, who was then sort of like excommunicated and cast out. And so he decided to continue his research outside in like the real world sort of thing, trying to figure out why Terrigen Mists gave the Inhumans their powers, and obviously died with a deep hatred of the Inhuman royal family, who obviously are the heroes of the Inhumans. And so Maelstrom tries to go against them by using technology that Reed Richards invents, which obviously then pulls the Fantastic Four in, lets them meet up with the Inhumans. And yeah, if they're going to do Maelstrom, it's probably not going to be the first villain though, because you'll want to set up the Fantastic Four as their own team first. There are various ways that they could bring in Wakanda and the Black Panther as an ally. One of those could be maybe an Easter egg in Black Panther 2, with Namor being a main villain there. Atuma and Tiger Shark are also Atlanteans that are enemies of the Fantastic Four. Being that they are Atlanteans, they could team up with the now public, technologically advanced nation that's at war with them, which would then also open the door for the love triangle thing, where Namor falls in love with Invisible Woman, and so you'd get the Fantastic Four in the middle of this war between two hidden, advanced, technologically advanced civilizations, which would be really cool, and could feel cosmic while still being on Earth. The Skrulls, there are 2 Skrull villains that the Fantastic Four has. This would obviously bring in Captain Marvel as one of their allies. So we've got Pybok, the Power Skrull. He can turn his skin into metal, kind of like Colossus. He can fire electric blasts. He can generate ice and cold, as well as having the ability to control people's minds, which would make him quite a formidable foe against the Fantastic Four, considering that he basically has a power that is the equal opposite of one of the Fantastic Fours. Then there's Colert, the Super Skrull, who has the Fantastic Four's powers themselves. So the stone skin, the elasticity, the fire and heat generation, and invisibility. I'm not sure if he has the force fields. He might also have force fields as well. And so if we're going to bring those in, that could open the doors to the Secret Invasion storyline, which would be really cool. If we wanted to have the Eternals have a hand in a Fantastic Four film, there could be Overmind, who is one of their villains. He is composed of 1 billion Eternian minds. So like because the Eternals exist in like little groups across the universe, and one of them I think gets killed or something, and they could relate that back to the Snap or something. Maybe it's Tony Stark's Snap, and this particular group of the Eternals was pro-Thanos or something. And then that would bring Overmind to Earth to try and take on whoever it was that destroyed. Like there's a way they could work around already pre-established MCU things for that. However, being such an obscure character, I'm not entirely sure if that's going to come in. We'll just have to wait to see where the Eternals goes. And as for purely and simply Fantastic Four characters, Diablo is kind of like Doctor Doom in that he's also a scientist with sort of arcane magical powers. He also has his android Dragon Man, which would be really cool. Would mean that he'd be able to distract the Fantastic Four with Dragon Man while secretly furthering his own plans, meaning the team would have to sort of divide and conquer as best they can in order to stop Diablo, which I think would be really cool. Crucible, who is Vladislav Shinsky and Miles Morlach? I think it's Miles Morlach. Don't quote me on the first name. But they get in the comics, they get the monks that built Doctor Doom's suit to build them suits after they've tried to create sort of this master race that would help enslave humanity so that they could then eliminate crime and war and poverty, and bring the world to world peace. So that villain's whole mission is peace through intimidation sort of thing, which obviously won't go down well with our heroes, but they also have ties to the High Evolutionary, being that the High Evolutionary was once a human geneticist. So it'll be interesting to see how he pans out in Guardians of the Galaxy 3. Vladislav Shinsky's protege was Arnim Zola, so it could be that there's some sort of way that they could tie that in as well, maybe, unless they could like they could reverse it and he was Arnim Zola's protege instead, which is why he's able to be as old as he is, as well as they are part of the Enclave, which is a group of geneticists, as I said, and like scientists and stuff that want to eliminate all the bad parts of humanity, and there's a point to that. Can't remember, but it was another tie into the MCU. It's come and gone out of my head. They tried twice to create the Master Race. One of them ended up being Adam Warlock in the comics. The other ended up being Aisha, aka Kismet, in the comics. And considering that we know the Sovereign's out there, it could be that they've already tried to. That didn't work, so they had to like shoot that into space, and it ended up becoming its own species on the other side of space, sort of thing. Which could be interesting to look at. We've then got Mole Man, which could introduce us to another sort of hidden world with Subterranea, and potentially allow us to tie the Savage Land in, assuming that the Savage Land is just the Subterranea of Antarctica, and therefore it's like just a different sort of tribe sort of thing. But Mole Man's would be sort of subterranean, like America. He controls all these really cool monsters and stuff, so it'd mean that we'd finally be able to get to see like potentially maybe Fin Fang Foom, and other sort of the weird monsters that Marvel's sort of, I think, wanted to use but hasn't really been able to find how to ground that in reality. And if you bring in Subterranea, you can sort of mix in a couple of mole monsters with some of these other ones, and obviously with Fin Fang Foom being one of the monsters, that could then help arch it from mole monsters to Devil Dinosaur in the Savage Land, which would be really cool. I think Kazar and Shanna the She-Devil definitely need to enter the MCU sometime within the next couple of years. Mad Thinker and the Awesome Android would be really cool. Again, same sort of thing with Diablo and Dragon Man. Mad Thinker would create Awesome Android as a distraction and then use his free time to further his own plot. It seems to be a surprising thing with Fantastic Four villains, because the next one's Red Ghost. He has 3 apes that he's able to mind control, and so he has a telepathic link with them and they follow his commands. He can also make himself intangible, so he can move through walls, while his apes have super strength and other abilities that would help keep the Fantastic Four at bay while the Red Ghost is doing his thing. And then we've got the Wizard and the Frightful Four, which would include the Trapster, Pastepot Pete, would probably include probably some other lesser known villains, maybe Archon would come into it, because I don't see them using, they can't use Sandman, who was one of the original members, and I don't see them using Medusa, unless they've got Diablo in there to use the magic to mind control her. But yeah, and there was also a page I saw. I have my my fact file sitting on my bed for the Fantastic Four. There was a page in there that showed that in one of the comic book lines, Doctor Doom had set up his own sort of Sinister Six. So if they're going to do that, they could use Latveria and his, Castle Doom as their base of operations. You could put in Dragon Man and the Mad Thinker and Red Ghost as members, maybe even the Crucible. This would give them at least 5 sidekick distractions, so that they're able to then, as a team, further their own plot. And I think doing that could eventually lead into, there's all these other villains out there that we haven't used in a while that we can revamp, like the Leader and Abomination from 2008's Hulk, that haven't been talked about pretty much since, to make a Masters of Evil team for the Avengers to go up against, which would obviously then include the Fantastic Four and maybe some of the X-Men characters as well. But if we start off with the Frightful Four, then that grows into sort of this sinister sextet, as it said in the fact files, and then this grows into a larger team of Masters of Evil. I think that'd be really cool to see. So yeah, that's all I've got for this video. If you'd like to, please give it a thumbs up. Please hit the subscription button and the notification bell if you want to see more videos like this. And yeah, all of my social links will be in the description down below. And until next time, guys, night to A2, and I'll check you all later.